Hello, everyone. I'm Sean, here to share with you all some techniques on how to design and build dApps with great UX that people trust. Just a little bit more about myself and Fortmatic. I'm the CEO of Fortmatic. We built a Web3 compatible JavaScript SDK for dApp developers. What it'll do is enable end users to interact with any dApp with just their phone numbers on any modern desktop or mobile browsers without needing to download a third-party browser extension or mobile wallets. Before founding Fortmatic, I was a product and design lead at Docker and was responsible for multiple projects and helped establish a great developer experience as a key differentiator of the company. So let's dive in on design. Great user experience is mostly invisible. Users typically don't notice them. Just like some people get more emotional when others forget their birthday and when they do remember. Great user experience is a lot more than what users can see visually on the surface. I'd like to start with games. You see, games are extremely complex compared to a lot of products out there, and yet players can still pick up a game relatively easily and have the motivation to learn more and get better at it. How are they doing this? Let's walk through the gameplay. The game starts off very simple. You get a base and a couple of miners/builders, and the most obvious thing you could do was to mine those blue minerals that was popping out in the user interface. And there isn't much else to do. Once you've gathered enough minerals, the grayed out button unlocks, and your builder can now build more structures. Here, I'm constructing a building that lets me build an army. Note the tooltip is showing me what will get unlocked next once the building is complete. After the building is completed, I can start training the Marine, a basic infantry unit. Sweet, now I have a Marine, something different from the builders. It's a combat unit, so you can shoot at other units. The Marine and builder are very different, but they share a lot of similar properties on how to control them and move them across the map. Since I've been moving the builders around, I got the hang of controlling the Marine pretty easily. As a newbie, I know the goal is to create an army and defeat the opponent, so I create a few more Marines. After you get the hang of the game mechanics, you'll be gradually introduced to a variety of units, both similar and different attributes as the Marines. And after you understand the units really well, you can start deriving more complex macro strategies to help win games. As you can see, each reveal of new information is based on the player's previous understanding of something else. When one task is completed, the next task gets unlocked in the UI. The effect of this ramp is exponential in relation to players' understanding of the game. This progression really helps ease new players into the game without requiring them to learn a lot of things up front and get discouraged right away. And this leads to our first design principle. This gradual revealing of user interface is a technique called progressive disclosure, which helps ease users into more complex tasks by reducing clutter, confusion, and cognitive workload, typically in the beginning of the user experience. It's very difficult to deliver a product that satisfies all requirements perfectly right away. We often feel the need to make sure our product gets delivered to our users with the most accurate technical description, the most thorough walkthrough guide, with all the features exposed to users right away, afraid they won't be able to find out about it. As a product builder, we shouldn't let our users bear the burden of our organizational requirements. It's OK to review information and provide more options later, and not overwhelming the user by showing everything at once. The next topic I want to talk about is error handling. It's usually thought of last, but how we can handle errors can significantly impact how users perceive our product. We shouldn't make users feel like they're walking on thin ice. And we have to make sure that users feel secure and supported. This error message is an exaggeration, but note the blaming and condescending tone. This is exactly the kind of tone we want to avoid. But unfortunately, still exists in many products. We don't want to bash users with a stick. Here's also an example of bad errors. These scary error messages look like it's spoken by a robot, while providing no cost and support to help users resolve them. There are a lot of errors like these out there. Fortunately, there are easy ways to prevent this. The trick lies in avoiding using negative keywords like these. Incorrect, errors, failed, invalidated, prohibited. It will make users feel like they've hit a brick wall. Here's an example of the old Twitter sign-up form. Notice the positive wording, clear indication of cause, and links to possible solutions. One example in the Ethereum space is the errors MetaMask model. Without too much context, red causes fear and anxiety as if user has done something wrong. We at Fortmatic are trying to avoid harsh errors that causes the user to panic and try to provide a comprehensive reason. Here's another example from my past experience building a product called Fortmatic at Docker. We used to rely heavily on VirtualBox, which is huge friction for developers. And we've seen scary, intense errors like this before. And the trick here is to make this error not seem like an error at all. Note the error now is part of a step-by-step installation wizard. Using calming blue color instead of red, everything feels normal. There's no panic, with a clear call to action and instructions on what to do next, instead of an error blowing up in user's face. Another great way to handle errors is to forgive users for their mistakes. Let's say when user deleted some supercritical data. To implement forgiveness, undo is usually the de facto solution. There will be no more need to show scary dialogues to warn users when they're about to make an irreversible change. We should strive to create a safety net for users whenever possible. Undo can be a lifesaver for users, and it will be worth the effort. Given blockchain, undo may be hard to implement given the nature of the blockchain, but we can still revert back a transaction once it's submitted and before it's confirmed. If needed, it's super effective in terms of making users feel safe and secure. The next technique I want to cover is animations, especially functional animations. Animations that serves a purpose. When this is done correctly, these animations can turn a digital product into a sequence of screens into carefully choreographed, memorable experiences. And usually, animations are thought of last as well, but they make night and day differences in DApps user experience. There are many functional benefits that comes from animations, such as to reduce cognitive load and lower the learning friction, which is great for teaching and guiding users through new concepts. It's also useful in preventing change blindness. Change blindness is when users won't perceive that something has happened on a page if it happened too fast. Significant changes in a web page can remain unnoticed because they lack strong cues due to the limitations of human attention span. Animations will also help solve this problem. And lastly, animations can also establish better recall in spatial relationships. So users can remember better where things are the next time they use the product. Some classic use of the animation example would be the famous genie effect in macOS and scroll bounce in iOS, which did wonders on getting users acclimated to this new user interface. Here are some more examples that are also easy to implement, but can make a huge difference in the UX. Always have a button hover and press state to make apps feel responsive. When users see a visual feedback, they're more likely to perceive the app is reliable. And also, when possible, use animations to communicate modality and page transitions. When users use your product, they are indeed using it to accomplish something. But emotionally, they're going through an experience and a story. The feeling is what they'll remember after the product and will drive them back to use it again. Animations makes your product feel more reliable and polished and give users some delight in their busy day. I also have some design techniques to share for anyone who are building a developer-focused experience. And it's called IKEA effect, which means customers place a disproportionately high value on products they partially created. In another word, high product quality and low effort to assemble a product equals high perceived value of the product and happy users. Note that low effort is very important here, since no one wants to take 3 days to build a piece of IKEA furniture. The IKEA effect applies really, really well to products such as APIs or SDKs that allows users to create their own products or services. However, there are 4 principles to keep in mind to execute the IKEA effect properly. The first principle of the IKEA effect is that it's super important to show the end result first. Just like the IKEA showroom, you need to get your users excited about spending hours of their valuable time tinkering with your product. There are also a few of my favorite ways to showcase the end result. Well, the simplest way is through a video or a looping animation, but always keep it short and to the point. If it's a video, ideally it should be less than 2 minutes. Examples or tutorials work really well as well. Meteor does a pretty good job here. The more relatable the example is to real life, the better. The more example there is, the more the users can see what they can accomplish with your product. If you really want to go hardcore on this, interactive demos are awesome. A great example here is the Go language tour. A good rule of thumb is that users should know to a broad extent of what your product can help them accomplish in less than 3 minutes. The key to motivating your users to do more and learn more is for them to get that one thing that differentiates your product from everyone else. As product owners, it's super important to know what that one thing is among many other great features of your product. If you're totally unsure of what your wow factor is, talk to your users, talk to your designers and researchers, and do some very unbiased user research because the result may surprise you. And do not force the wow factor to be what you wanted it to be. I'm going to give some wow factor examples from a user's perspective following the products. For Meteor, I was wowed by how much faster it is to stand up a project and build a real-time cross-platform application using programming languages that I'm already familiar with. This is a huge step forward in terms of ease of use compared to how I had to do it before knowing Meteor. And they provide a great solution for prototyping products really fast. For Stripe, I was wowed by how much faster it is to put in a payment form on websites and basically start making money for your business and manage the transfers and customers on the dashboard. I remembered helping a friend's small venue to put together an online booking system using Meteor and Stripe in less than a day's of work and started collecting money the next day. And for my past experience working on Docker for Mac, our wow factor was that users can install, run and see the result of a container on a blank laptop within 5 minutes. We were super religious about this metric. Generally, Your users should be able to grasp what the first wow factor of your product is in less than 15 minutes. It's also important to do the extra hard work for our users. Just like IKEA, they put in the extra work to create wood pieces and nails that fit perfectly together. Great design requires putting in the extra thought and effort, making the experience feel very natural without users even noticing. In our case, doing the hard work means creating a safety net for our users, taking care of all the edge cases and errors with techniques mentioned in previous topics, allowing them to freely experiment with your product like a sandbox. Lastly, try to keep things simple. Avoid wordy docs and text in the UI. If you look at IKEA's instruction manual, it's mostly just pictures and no text. Also try to avoid these super long step-by-step feature introductions and walkthroughs if you can, or at least keep them short. They add friction to the user experience and may appear hacky and cause users to be impatient and confused, which will in turn lower the perceived value of your product. I have to slip this in here because the Stripe documentation is awesome. With its simple, clear, thorough instructions, code snippets, and interactive widgets, it delights me every time to look at it and use it. Also, if your product is targeting developers, about 40% of users will go straight to the docs before even reading the rest of your landing page. So it's important to really make your docs shine. It's basically how you would market your product. To connect it all, the IKEA effect and progressive disclosure are great to be used in conjunction. At every step, when users accomplish a small task, they'll be rewarded psychologically at the same time as new experiences revealed in the UI. This compounding effect will strongly motivate your user to learn more about your product and build more things with it. Well, we covered a lot of material today, so let's do a quick recap and try to remember some of them. We started to talk about progressive disclosure, which is a great technique to ease users into doing more complex tasks. The benefit of this will reduce the clutter in your UI, reduce potential confusion on what to do next, and reduce the cognitive load getting started with your product. We then covered error handling. The goal of having good error handling is to make users feel secure and supported. Avoid using negative words like invalid, failed, incorrect, and always provide the cause of the error and possible solutions to resolve it. And also remember, the best error is that there's no error in the first place. Only show errors as a last resort. And always try to prevent it from happening. And finally, you should forgive user actions with the undo feature if you can. Next was functional animations. We shouldn't think of animations as the last step of building a product. They serve important functions to help reduce user cognitive load, prevent change blindness, and establish better recall in spatial relationships. Lastly, the goal of the IKEA effect is to increase the perceived value of your product by letting your users do some of the work and explore in a sandbox and a safe environment. You have to first interest the users by showing the end result of their effort through a video, loopback animation, real and useful examples, or interactive tutorials. And second, once users start tinkering with your product, really emphasize on letting them get to that wow factor in the first 15 minutes. Next, do the hard work for your users. Take care of all the edge cases and errors and leave creative space for the users. And finally, keep it simple. Focus on writing a great documentation and try not to use or shorten a step-by-step feature introduction. There are many, many ways to improve user experience. The essence of this workshop is that as product builders, let's start notice and appreciate all the tremendous effort poured into these well-designed products and user experience and learn from them. Focus on experience that the user may not necessarily notice. I will be also sharing these slides later on our media channels. And that's all. Thanks so much for being a great audience. And I love to talk about design. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter and chat. I will talk more about Fortmatic in the opening ceremony. So for this workshop, feel free to ask me any question about design.